I'd like to call the order of the Committee of the Whole for October 13th at 5:10 p.m. Attendance roll call.
Alderman Madden.
Here.
Alderman Kubaki.
Here.
Alderman Engelhardt.
Here.
Alderman Kapusta.
Here.
Alderman Terrence.
Here.
Alderman Hamel.
Here.
Alderman Wolf. Here. And Mayor Petfalski.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Statement of public notice.
The meeting was noticed in accordance with the open meeting law.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes from September 22nd.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. New business, finalized 2021 capital and operating budgets. So Sharon sent out on Friday. You want to come up to the microphone right away? Updates that we have made to the capital and operating budget. Let's start off, were there any questions on what we had in there, or discussion? While you're gathering your thoughts on that, is just a couple things that I wanted to point out. So with the budget as presented on Friday, the tax rate would go up, which would go up about 1.8%, which would affect the average home in Muskego, where I'm saying the average home is around $300,000, about a $24 increase on their taxes. CPI last year was 2.3% according to the Department of Labor.
So I have a question real quick in regards to the refinancing of the bonds. This savings, is that figured into the budget? And if so, is it over each year? The whole amount's not this year? Is it just what
That's correct.
we would incur
Yep.
in the savings of
Yes.
this year?
Yes, and we anticipate another refunding early spring next year, which will have a substantial savings, which isn't built in because we just didn't move forward with it. And it's better to be conservative. So if it comes, the principal and interest comes under, that's fine
Okay.
for this particular fund.
So the 49,000 we're saving roughly is not in the budget, you said?
This is the 190,000.
This current one that we just did is in the budget. The one
The-
we're anticipating doing next spring is not yet, because while we're anticipating a pretty big savings, you don't know what's going to happen between here and spring that
Those
could
will-
make it go haywire.
The 190 in the budget or just the 49? The 190, the whole amount is?
Well, for the portion for 2021.
The 49.
Okay, so just the 49.
49,
Okay,
that's what I said,
that's what I
49.
thought,
Yes.
Okay.
Is that other one we're talking about, is that 190 a year or just total?
No.
Darn it.
It might be.
I can try. I can hope.
It actually might be.
Add a zero.
The other one will be significant, though.
Okay.
Come on.
Are we ready to
Use the
talk?
word.
I know, I was
Use
just,
your word.
I know we were into like questions or comments. I just kind of wanted to open with some discussion on, I would love to see what it would look like if how do we get to a point where there's an option to say, hey, here's a proposal that doesn't involve a tax increase. And I realize that there's a lot here. There's a lot to look at. My opinion is that I don't feel it's my place to micromanage the mayor's team, how he's doing things. And so to drill down and say, hey, get rid of this, get rid of that. It's a hard thing to do because I'm not the one that has to do the day-to-day. Like, I just get to go home after this meeting and then you have to deal with what we decide. So looking at what are the alternatives? What are the options? Are there things that are in there? What would it look like if we said, hey, we aren't going to raise taxes? What would that proposal be for us to have an alternative to look at, right? I don't know if there's a ton in there. I can speak to one that is in my area of expertise. The only thing that probably is applicable from my side, but just kind of looking at the IT, and I hadn't had a chance to talk to Barb yet. I was hoping to have a sit down with her. Conceptually right now, there's new positions that are looking to be added, and there's still consulting fees that are in there from previous years. And so from what my experience is, that sort of the consulting fees and the full-time employees sort of offset each other, right? When a company or municipality runs with no IT staff, their consulting fees are through the roof because they outsource it. When you have full internal, it kind of scales backwards. There's still sometimes that expert side of bringing that in. It looks like from 2020 to 2021, the proposed amount is still around 40,000 in consulting fees with the add-on of staff. And so sort of that dialogue to say, where is that, and have, what would the need be as far as potentially upping the consulting fees, but not jumping into that full-time staff at this point. For example, Greendale, uses an outsourced IT person. I used to work for a company that actually was with them for a little while. At the cost of, it's about $1,000 per day for the week. So say you had somebody there full-time on Wednesday, right? The benefit of doing a consulting, upping the consulting as opposed to a full-time person, it really helps build the case that, hey, these hours are needed. It's not a commitment. So if you find that you don't need it, you can turn around and say, hey, we scale it back and you're not now committed to a full-time employee. You also get a real wide breadth of experience. When you bring in a firm 1 day a week, you don't have just one person. You have usually a firm of about 15 to 20 experts. And so your need for that third-party consulting fees go down as well because you're now, you're bringing in a whole team of individuals. I think it's something that potentially could be an opportunity for savings without, I don't want to propose we burn out the IT staff and say, hey, just, if that's part of what the issue is happening, certainly don't want that. I know that there are some concerns on that being, the person doesn't necessarily know, and there's a little bit of learning curve for an IT firm, but the benefit of it being multiple people is that their level of skill exceeds what you would get from one individual. So I think it's worth having a discussion as a potential option for an alternative that gives us some leeway to say, hey, maybe we can get down to that where we don't need this year to raise taxes. And Rick and I chatted a little bit. Mayor, I hope you're okay if I call you Rick. I know I don't want to.
My name.
Okay, good. I don't want to insult you. That there are some recurring liabilities and understanding that as the community grows, as the tax base grows, there will be a need to add people, and having that balance, I realize that that's a part of what's happening. But with all of that I shared, I would like to see, hey, what would it look like if we said, hey, how do you get to that where we're not raising and what needs to come off? And if we all look at it and say we're not okay with that, now we've at least entertained that option and then have something to choose between. And I hope that makes sense.
So go on.
Just a quick comment, and I think you're onto something there, at least to talk about. And you mentioned you bring a team in, and the consultants will be a team of people who deal in government already. So maybe we're going to bring more expertise in. And again, with the COVID situation, maybe if this is a way to reduce the budget till we find out what the economy is going to be like in a year or so, maybe it's something we should talk about.
So let's address the consulting part first. I did have lengthy discussions with IT about this. They believe, and I concur, that for one, there isn't a dollar savings in that based on what her needs are on it. The biggest problem, and I know consultants like to spout exactly what you're saying, is you don't have one knowledgeable person, you have this whole team behind you. And I think you hit the nail on the head of what the big problem is you used to work for one of those. And we're not looking to have a position where somebody's coming in to fill in at the help desk or something like that. We're looking for someone to know our network system intimately. And I guess the best way I could compare that to would be if you have surgery for cancer, are you going to have a different doctor come in each time? And do the repeated surgeries on it? Or would you want the one that knows your case the best, continuing on and following you through that journey? And maybe that's not the best comparison, but that's the problem we've had with consultants in the past, is you have someone, very strong and enterprising that's assigned to you, and 6 months later they move on to their next job, or maybe 2 years later. It's probably more like even 2 years later, because it takes a good year to know the intricacies of a network system. And as you know, as being in that career path, that it's not just like learning the interface for our agendas, and that it's how they all tie into our system. And we could all have similar interfaces, but each municipality you go to, their network and how it's set up could be drastically different. So for some positions in IT, that might work the consultant route, but this particular one, where they need to be we need to have consistency there.
Mayor,
Well, and
I have a comment.
yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
You can go first.
Maybe I understand the question as to if we're adding a person, what is the need for the consulting on top of that person?
I would agree, but were you going to address that?
We did actually reduce the consulting by,
Did it come out of the most recent one?
$30,000, $31,000.
Is it 30 total, or it came down to 10?
It was reduced down. Yeah, so the amount, 30,800.
So it came down 10 grand, because it was originally 40, I think. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 40 was the number.
No, there were multiple accounts that were used.
My understanding was a $30,000 reduction.
Yes.
Yes.
Overall, it was, I think there were 3 accounts, networking and programming,
He's yelling at me
computer.
for paper, sorry.
What was that?
Quiet. He's whispering in my ear, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
It's causing problems. I mean, I get what you're saying. I've actually been on both sides. I now hire consultants, so I'm and I know what they do, and I'm comfortable. If I wasn't comfortable with the situation, I wouldn't have brought it. A firm versus an individual, when done right, those people are generally interchangeable. And if anything, you're leveraging. I don't want to get super technical on different types of hardware within a network and different disciplines within the IT side. It's something that, I mean, if you wanted to kind of contact, again, I reference Greendale because I've seen their operation and been at their place. They've changed vendors over the years and have still maintained sort of that third party because it gives them the expertise without needing a network engineer on that high level. It is a $100,000 job. And that's with an individual that has some expertise in that. You're getting that from someone that you can have 1 or 2 days a week. I guess I'm looking at it's a pretty sizable jump to go from not having that to having originally pitched 2 full-time people, now down to 1. Why such a huge jump as opposed to kind of slowly approaching into that, saying, hey, let's have somebody part-time and then go from there?
Can I answer his question first, or do you have an answer?
No, I'm just wondering where that's reflected, that change.
The 30,000?
Yeah.
Yes, I know if you look at the budget to budget, it shows 10, but Barb originally had the networking, programming, and consulting $30,800 higher beyond the 10,000. So that was reduced.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, so if you look at the programming and consulting
Yep.
on page 15, and the computer and network charges, it did go up 10,000 if you're comparing budget to budget, but in the original department request, it was 30,800 higher than what is reflected in front of you. So it was on top of the 10,000.
So
Does that make sense?
10, and page 15, so we're seeing general government information technology 100.01.14 at the bottom, that programming and consulting at
Yes.
40,000. Is that the one we're looking at, or are you looking at a different one?
Yeah, that was higher than the 40. I can't remember if that was at $20,000 higher or if you take the net between the programming and consulting and the network charges, I don't recall how it was split, but both of them were $30,800 higher than what's reflected right now. So that was reduced.
Shouldn't, I mean, if we're looking to replace the consultants with a full-time employee,
Well,
wouldn't we?
and we're not just doing that. I mean, part of it is, let me answer Alderman Terrence's first question. How did we get to this? Originally, we had more people in that department. When John left, he was never replaced. Barb moved in his position. So really, so we've been down. We're overstretching that department right now.
Okay.
And
How long ago did he leave?
what?
How long ago did he leave?
A couple years back, years back.
At least six,
Three,
five,
four,
6
maybe? I don't
years,
know.
maybe
You would probably know more.
5 or 6 years, I think.
Do we know, obviously we weren't here either, the reason behind not replacing him at the time? Was there?
Budget constraints.
Well, plus I think the IT department, not to say anything bad about it, but it's a gift that keeps on giving because of technology. You know, it seems to be, we have to keep upgrading and changing. And I mean, it's turning into its
Well,
own
and
big source, you know, and like I said, I'm not bashing, I'm just giving the facts that when we first did the change, it probably wasn't as necessary as it is today. I mean, you know.
There's a much greater need in the police department as well.
Yes.
You almost need a
And-
part-time person.
And quite honestly, that's where majority of this new position will be working, is on the police network and keeping that up and going with the 911. And I mean, there's no room for error with that because we house so much essential stuff in-house. Alderman Kabaki?
The general question is, what does it take to balance a budget? About 300,000, is that
Correct.
correct? And I've gone through this budget,
The budget is balanced.
I'm sorry, to lower.
I knew what he meant.
To have a zero increase, it takes about
To budget the way you want it
$300,000 to do that. Yeah. And quite frankly, I've gone through this budget virtually line by line. Our biggest expense is personnel. Our biggest asset is personnel. If we don't take care of that asset, we can't serve the public properly. So the things that I'm seeing in this budget, with hopefully the approval of a HR department, and hopefully by continuing these raises, we're taking care of that greatest asset that we have. And John, I fully understand and I appreciate, you know, the question that how do we stay at a zero tax increase? This is something we probably should have done incrementally over the years as our costs have gone up. We've kind of disregarded that. And now we're at a point where I feel that we have to make this adjustment just to maintain what we have right now, not add a great deal to it, but certainly take care of the most important asset we have, which is our staff.
In the short time I've been here, I can tell you that this place does not have a lot of fat when it comes to personnel by any means. You can't even call City Hall and get a person very easily if you're just dialing the general number. You get put through this labyrinth of voicemail jail because we don't have the personnel for it right now. So we are very lean. And as Alderman Kabaki is pointing out, our budget mainly is people, and we're in the people business.
You know, and I don't want this to be it's hard discussions, right, when you're talking dollars, and to not feel by any stretch of the means saying that, you know, I feel like, hey, we're too fat or we have excess or you're mismanaging or anything like that. For me, I'm just kind of principally looking at it and saying, okay, it has been a really weird year. It's been rough. You got some businesses that are closed. You got some people out of work. There's a lot of unknowns. Is this a year to say, hey, I realize there's history, Kevin. I get that. And it seems like a really rough year to say, hey, we're going to raise taxes when there are some people that their incomes have gone down somewhat significantly and some aren't working. And so just from that angle, looking at it and saying, is it a good management of that situation and this position to say, hey, let's raise taxes now? Sort of the angle that I'm looking at it from. disregarding that, yes, there are people involved, and yes, when you talk raises and, or not raises, that it has a negative effect on individuals, and total respect for everyone in the city, the police department, and thank you for what you guys do, so.
Alderman Wolf?
Well, and if I looked at the budget, revenues were up, expenses were down. The other thing I looked at is, what did we do with the 190,000 that was taken out from the CDA? How does that work?
So did you have a chance to look at the second attachment that shows
I can't pull anything up on my
recommended
computer.
appropriations? It should be electronically.
It's not, you don't have it on the computer, do you?
It should be.
When I pull it up, I get a
This is
single
in the
page
packet.
of
Yeah,
budget updates and proposals.
It's under cow, it's like the.
Oh, there it is. The
first
second one,
page.
transfer CDA funds, 87% was 190, now it's 165,
Yes,
and they're
so
both
we're-
in parentheses.
We're reversing that.
So what does that mean?
So it was utilized to balance the budget because we needed action
At 190,
at 190.
Okay.
And then transportation aids came in $100,000 higher. State video, $29,000 higher. So we were able to reverse that because the mayor and I discussed that using a one-time funding source that would be the best option to take out. Because you typically don't want it
so we're not
balanced 'cause
using
it
any
will come
CDA
back.
funds at all? It's all
Just-
going back into the CDA,
With about $24,000.
$24,000
Because we
we're using?
initially transferred 190 and now it's down to 165.
So we're transferring 165 over?
No,
We're not, we're
reversing it.
transferring 24.
Correct.
25,000.
Correct.
But the other question I have on this is that we also collected $300,000 more in taxes too, last year, or this year, whatever, for this budget. So my thinking is, how long has this CDA fund been sitting there? And what do we use it for? We don't even have a CDA anymore. Why would, and how much money is in that fund? 700,000 or something? What was in that roughly?
No, that particular fund is 190,000
That's all we have left in the CDA.
in that particular special revenue fund. But we
But
are,
in general, how much do we have in the CDA?
well, we're discussing closing the TID 9, and that is when all these funds would close.
how
So
much-
there's probably a couple 100,000.
I thought we
in
had
that.
like $400,000 or $600,000 in the CDA fund. Did we move money out of there before?
I'm not sure.
Or maybe
which-
that was when we used
I
it for
think
that
you're-
building.
I think you're talking about the TID residual, capital improvement fund.
And that's in here too, right?
Yes, that's a separate fund.
And how much money are we moving out of that?
We are net,
Is it transfer from TIF residual, 230,000? Special revenue?
oh, well, you're moving ahead of me now.
Is that what you're
Now
talking
we're-
about? I don't know.
That is the fund that I'm referencing.
Okay, so we're
And that's a
using
separate
230,000 out of that, we're moving over?
special- For the park lighting, or the lighting at Muskego Norway School District. Because the mayor and I talked.
That's the baseball, instead of doing Park Arthur, we discussed doing the improvements at the high school for a lesser amount. The funding for Park Arthur was landfill. We can't use landfill for that, so we're doing this transfer thing.
Okay, well, then I'm going to go back to the 190,000, which we're using 25. Why wouldn't we use that? We don't, that money's been sitting there, we're not using it for anything. Why would we not use that to reduce the budget? I think that might be a thing to do.
That's your prerogative to do that, but it's a one-time funding source, so that means you're going to have to come up with that next year.
Well, here's my thinking, is that we have the reevaluation coming through at 160, 100, I don't know, how much is it off the top of your head? How much is the reevaluation costing?
Yeah, probably about 100 or 50. I don't have that total in front of me. I thought the entire amount was 53,000.
Oh, just 53,000, not
Yes.
150, okay, I don't know where I got that from, but, so we could use that money to offset that, and when we reevaluate, we should gain again. I mean, we gained $300,000 in tax money this year alone. So when we reevaluate, we're gonna gain more.
Well,
So why wouldn't we use it as a one-time
reevaluations
source?
don't gain money. Reevaluations just tell you what you're worth.
Well, I know, but then you work out your tax base out of it.
Well, spending is what makes your taxes go up. Reevals, having a new assessment doesn't make your taxes go up. So all that does is make sure that we're properly splitting that pie up between the community. So that's all a reeval does. It doesn't bring you any more tax money.
Yeah,
But my
'cause-
point is, we can use this 190 or whatever's in there.
Well, you can use it wherever
And-
you want, but the problem
And
is.
why would we keep it in there if we can use it now? It's the people's money.
There's
and-
other things.
And I think we can give it back to
And
them.
there's other things that would be more appropriate to use it for, like a one-time road or, lights at on a baseball field or something that's a one-time thing, but we're.
Yeah, but we've been sitting on this for a one-time thing for a long time. Now it's the one-time time to use it.
Well, the reason we,
Not for
But
operating.
it's not. It's,
So you'd rather raise taxes than put that in there
you're
to break
taking
even?
a one-time, I mean, all you're doing is
Pushing
kicking
down
the
the
can
road.
down the road. By taking a one-time income against an ongoing expense, that's foolishness.
So what are we going to use the money for in the future? A one-time project.
oh, I'm
So that's
sure-
what we have right now.
Well, and
Until we
Every
met-
year.
One-time projects that come up every year.
Fire trucks and.
I mean, I think some of that is looking at the next 12 months and anticipating it being different than this year. I mean, we had it's hard to, what's the tax base going to look like next year? I know we do the reeval, right? But you essentially could have, with that reshared load, everyone's taxes essentially going down, and then
right.
increase would be something that really wouldn't be an increase for everybody, right? So you
Be more of a balance.
add 3% more properties, my tax number goes down, but we actually raise the rate, but it wouldn't raise taxes for me. Be paying the same.
I don't like to gamble.
I mean, I don't know if it's a
The last
gamble. I mean,
reval.
it's, we're not gambling, right? We're just saying that, hey, if it is
A
if it's,
reval doesn't guarantee that.
No.
Anything.
correct.
Well,
But at the same
in
time,
this market, it's
it
going
might.
up.
I mean,
Well, no, a reval never. A reval
Yeah.
never does anything.
what
to
I'm
raise-
saying is that you could be at a place where a tax percentage increase would have a net zero effect on somebody over $300,000, right? Because we reeval that the rate comes down because it's spread out, and then you could have a bump, which essentially wouldn't affect
No.
homeowners. Yes, that mathematically, that does work. That is
It
correct.
does. In our last reevaluation that happened, our taxes went down,
It's possible that could happen,
most likely.
but I don't want to take that risk.
I think there's maybe some mixing between the tax levy and the tax rate.
I
guess
understand that.
for me to explain this, if you look, I don't know if you have your budget document, but there's the last 2 pages. You have the levy and the tax rate. 2018, we had our last revaluation. The levy went up by, let's see, 2012. Oh, 2018 is in their choice, I see. Well, if you look between 2017 and 2018, the levy went up, however, the tax rate went down.
Right.
So potentially that will
reevaluation.
happen next year where our levy will go up, but most likely the tax rate will go
Well,
down. So I think there's maybe a little, the mixing between
I'll just
the
get back to my
levy.
point. We've been sitting on the CDA money, and it's the people's money, and we're waiting for that one-time use, and what do we want to use it for? It's something down the road. So you're going to kick it down the road to use it for something else down the road, when down the road is here now.
Well, we're just closing it in 2021 because the TID will be closing. It was tied to TID 9. So we weren't really sitting on it. We had to keep it open, and we didn't touch it for that reason. Now it's available in 2021. So we haven't been sitting on it.
So we could use it in this budget in 2021.
You could if you wanted to.
You can,
That's my
however, and if you're going to use it, I implore you to use it don't use it on operating, use it on capital. Because all you're doing is, you're not saving anyone any money, because whatever you save next year, they're going to have to pay that plus next year's increase next year. So you're not saving any money for anyone. If you use it on capital, then you possibly, you don't have to find a funding source. But I implore you not to use it on operating. It's just bad budget policy.
Yep. And this really is our last year to use the unused levy capacity. If we don't utilize it, it's virtually going to be gone by next year. So this is kind of our last.
So that TIF money that we're putting for 230,000, we have to pay that back in, or what is that? Is that,
No.
we're moving things around?
No,
Under the
that-
special revenue?
That is our closed TIDS 1 through 7,
Okay.
which it closed back in 2005. That fund was used for many years for loans to local businesses, and that changed with Parkland Town Center, which they still haven't developed, so we did not use the money for that. So right now, that was the most logical fund, because it's for capital improvements, to use for the lighting.
Well, I guess I got to go back to that revenues were up, spending or expenses were down. Tax revenue coming in was up $300,000, and we still want a 1.8% increase, which
When you say
is how many
expenditures
dollars?
are down, what are you referencing?
Yeah.
What's that?
What are you
When you
referencing?
say
When I looked through it, it showed me
expenditures are,
expenses were down and revenues were up, but
No.
what does the 1.8% equal? $331,000?
the 1.8, I believe, is the tax rate increase you're referencing.
Yeah, how much is that dollar-wise exactly?
Well, what's the levy?
The levy-
The levy increase is what you
The
look at
levy
when you're
increase
talking
is
about.
300,000,
Even? Or
a little less.
a little
We have
less?
50,000 for debt service tax levy, and the balance is for the operating. So it's 290, I get my cheaters in.
Just under 300,000 is fine, that, you don't have to look it up.
Yeah.
If it's just 290 to 300,000, just so I have an idea,
Yep, 291,040.
291, okay.
Yep. And overall, the expenses went up over $400,000.
Alderman Capusta.
If you look at the size and scope and the nature of this entire budget, and you consider all the services that we provide for the city and residents of Muskego, it's pretty credible to keep it under 2%. It really is. And nobody wants to obviously spend money, but if you look at just the cost of living and what those expenditures are today, I can't think of anything that's going down or remains flat. Sharon, I'd like to thank your team. Rick, thank you. You guys did an awesome job. And I think it's in pretty good shape, especially when you look at what Muskego is. So thank you, guys.
No, I agree, Tom. I mean, everybody's effort is great. This is just conversation. It's time to hear it out and see
Well,
what's
and
going on.
I think it's important to have these conversations. That way, we have to go back to our constituents and say we did the best job we did, and you can't do that just by, coming in and making a motion and not having discussion and approving it. So I appreciate this, and, it gives us something to go back to when people ask, well, why did it? Did you look at this? Did you look at that? So these conversations are good, and I encourage them.
And I think, and I don't want to put words in John's mouth, but I think he's probably thinking what I'm thinking is, I use the words, a gift that keeps on giving. Once you raise something, you never take it back. So, let's just say there's not a raise next year too. I think that's one of our conversations that's got to be aired out, so.
Well, if you are just looking at tax rate, if you look at 2021, it's 4.55. In 2016, it was 4.89. So I think in comparison, we're doing
But we
very
didn't
well.
raise taxes.
What was that?
But we didn't raise taxes.
Yes,
What's that?
we did raise taxes. Did you make a comment? Did we raise taxes?
What years were that, did you say?
I'm just looking at the history that I provided for you back in 2016.
Yeah.
So it was 4.89, and if you're looking at the actual rate per thousand, it's 4.55 proposed, which is less than 5 years ago.
And I guess we can point to things what we've all done here that we're paying for today. This building, part of it, the positions we added throughout the last year between budgets, the catching up of in prior years holding back on squad cars and public works vehicles. So I'm trying to get us back to a point where we can go forward and not have these ups and downs every year, so we can keep a steady ship. But there was some plug or some tape put over some holes over the years that we need to fix. And I think
Well, we really never held back on anything. I mean, we've asked questions about if they needed it 100%, but we've actually had plans for years out of when they're going to need cars and when they're going to need this, when they're going to need that. We've always had 1, 2, or 3 years laid out in front of us on the budgets.
Well, and I'm not saying the council did it, but ultimately, the regular rotation, the prudent rotation schedule for some of the vehicles were overstretched at times. And
I mean, we do ask the questions, though, if they absolutely need it, if they can use it. I mean, we've never denied anybody, I think, anything. I think 1 or 2 years, we might have held back on a fire truck so we could put the budget together for years to come, so we know that that big one's coming next year. But, you know, I don't think we really told anybody if they absolutely needed something and we denied it. Have we? I don't think
No,
so.
but there's a big difference between the capital budget and the operating budget.
Right.
I guess, you
Yes.
know, we seem to talk about the budget as a whole, but you really have to separate the two. The capital budget, you know, thank God we have a landfill. I mean, it's,
Gosh, yeah.
I mean,
I
I don't
agree.
know what we do without that. On the operational side is the side that, you know, that, to me, that controls the tax rate, not the capital side of it. So on the operational side, we can come up with $300,000, no tax increase. I can't see how that's even possible in this budget. I just don't.
Well, I came
don't
up
see
with the
what-
190, so I mean, that was my idea, but,
Any other, Alderman Engelhardt?
I'd like to ask just a curious question. How much do we vary with the state sharing and so forth from year to year compared to this kind of a number?
The state shared revenue?
Yeah, because
That
we don't
came
always know
in-
that going into
It
this.
came in within $186 of the
It was
prior
almost
year.
identical this year.
Yes.
What's happened over the longer course, the last few
It's
years?
been holding steady
been
for
holding-
several years.
So we would more or less anticipate that for another year. Most likely it'll do the same.
You
Well,
know,
it's the
I
second-
don't like to promise.
You never know.
It's the second year of a biannual budget, so you never know what they're going to do with the next week.
Yeah, but I understand that, but I was just curious, by comparison, the amount we're talking about here, what happens to us on, you know, that has major impact on us sometimes, I think.
Yeah,
But not
well,
lately.
more concerning are the transportation aids.
Transportation.
That
Transportation is more
substantial.
concerning, okay.
Yeah.
which hopefully we see something the following year.
I mean, we're fortunate. I have a weekly meeting with the other large city mayors in Waukesha County, and, you know, for one, as Kevin said, they don't have a landfill. I mean, it's a curse and a blessing all at once. It covers a lot of our budget. We don't have the business base and the hotel
Retail.
taxes and
Yeah.
everything everyone else has. Again, that's a blessing this year.
This year.
Because they all have hotels that they actually use for their operating, and the fees just aren't there this year. So they have a huge budget hole from 2020, and their 2021 budget is a mess as well. So you look at our overall you look at our equalized value and our equalized rates compared to New Berlin and Brookfield, and we're about at least a dime cheaper per thousand. I mean, there's a number of significant savings that we have in Muskego, and I think our services are on par with everything they have. So,
Oh, I think services are great.
I have a question about this budget. In the operating budget, are we delaying the IT person till the second quarter?
yes,
And are we hiring an HR person in the
third quarter.
third quarter?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
End of third quarter, just to be clear, but yes.
Fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Only one quarter.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to remind everyone, the public hearing for the operating budget then would be on October 27th, and it will require a 2/3 vote because of the unused levy capacity, so 5. So,
The budget, you said, takes 2/3 vote?
This year,
Correct.
because we're recouping the unused cap, that 135,000 from 3 years ago. If we don't recoup it this year, it's gone forever. Any other questions? Moving on to the 2021 water and sewer utility budgets.
In an effort to save time, I guess we can do these almost side by side. So if you look at page 6, which would be Schedule 5 for both budgets, this is a summary of the working capital for all funds within each utility, and it summarizes all the other schedules 1 through 4. So on the sewer side, there were no significant changes to report. Extremely healthy fund balance. Operating and maintenance fund has over $4 million. And in total, the all funds combined equate to 14 million. So there is no reason to raise rates on the sewer side. And again, no significant changes to report. So any questions on the sewer utility? Okay, and then in the water utility operating and maintenance fund, the total is about 540,000, which is just shy of the recommended amount, which would be 3 months of operations and expenditures, and that would be about $600,000. So I did reach out to the Public Service Commission, and we are eligible for a simplified rate increase, which would be 3%. So I would need the council's approval to move forward with that process.
Water, you said?
Correct. And that is recommended by our auditors,
'Cause we need to-
especially with the mains
We need to be a
project.
certain percentage or something, or a certain dollar amount, or what is it?
It's 3% across the board.
You can do two ways of doing a rate increase. You can do a full-blown rate increase where they go and essentially audit everything, and it takes time, a lot of staff, and then in the end, you typically get 3% or less. Or you can do a simplified case, which is just a real simplified form that Sharon fills out and it's approved automatically.
Yep, and I guess to answer, give you a little more detail, an average residential quarterly increase would be about $2.
Do you need a motion for that now?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor of the simplified rate case, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the sewer utility budgets or comments? All right, any communications miscellaneous business? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned at 5:52.